Ghost clipping in Fallout 4 is a newly discovered exploit that you can use to avoid many collision issues when building settlements, and in this video I am going to show you how to use this exploit. Hi, I'm Mo and I'm trapped in Fallout. To use this exploit, you will need to enter settlement build mode, and we are currently in Sanctuary. Once you're in settlement build mode, go into structures, concrete, and select the walls option and select this one, the concrete wall option. And what you want to do is place it in one corner of the map. So this happens to be the southeast most corner of the map. From here, once you've placed it again as far into the corner as you can, use the group select option on the concrete wall. Now, if you're not sure how to do that, when I highlight this, notice I have the select button at the bottom. So if I hit select using the select option, then I just select this item. Now remove your selection, so just sort of cancel the selection. Now instead of pressing select, hold down the select button and this will perform what is called the group selection. Now we will use this group selection in a moment, but for now what you need to understand is to actually highlight this object and get a little bit better use out of it, use the group select option as opposed to the select option. Now from here what we're going to do is travel to the most northwest corner of this map. So again, I'm going to highlight this object and use the group select, and now I'm going to travel to the northwest corner of the map. Now while I do this, let me explain why I'm doing this in particular. So as you move around the Fallout 4 game world, what happens, so this will be hard to see, if you have a look at the objects right there over there, they're not fully loaded in, they are sort of partially loaded in. And the reason why they are partially loaded in is simply because that is just how the game works. It gives this seamless feel to allow objects in the game world to load in. So that is primarily why you can just sort of travel around the map and it looks like everything is loaded in, but in reality what is happening is as you're sort of moving closer to an object, it slowly loads in. And by that notion, as you move away from something, so if you have a look, the red rocket is sort of over there, I can just about make out the red rocket, but the details on that red rocket aren't visible, and that is because that happens to be a bit further away. Now there is a more technical explanation to this, but I'm just going to go with the more basic one. But if you're interested, in technical sense, they are basically loaded. Game objects are sort of placed in what's called different cells, and as you walk from one cell to another cell, some parts of the game world starts to load while other parts start to sort of unload. Anyway, with all of that said, if you notice, I still have the pillar selected. This pillar was originally way over there in the southeastern corner, but as we start to move towards the northwestern corner, this should happen. So now if you notice, this object is sort of transparent, and this is what's called the ghosted clipping object. With this effect, what has happened is the object itself has, if you like, become unloaded into the game, but the highlighted section of it is still visible. In other words, you still have control over the object, but it's not visible in your current selection anymore. Now, as said, this is what's called the ghosted clipping exploit in this particular case. Now with this, again, somewhat newly discovered exploit, you now have a little bit more freedom when it comes to trying to place an object, and we're going to see that right now. So what I'm going to do is go back into the southeastern corner, and what I'm going to do is use a pre-selected prefab that you can find in the game world. So again, I'll show you that right now. So I'm back in the southeastern corner of the Sanctuary map, and from here I have selected this small metal shack. Now the reason why we used group selection earlier is because of this. So I'm using the same pillar and I'm going to place the pillar, say about here, just close enough to the object but not actually touching the object. If you're not sure what the group selection method is, if you highlight this pillar and you hold down the select button, it actually ends up selecting everything. Now this is an existing exploit in the game. We can now place this pillar wherever we want, but as a result we can also clip the object into places that you usually cannot. So for example, if you notice, I can actually put the object right here, and I can move this pillar out of the way, and now I have sort of placed this small metal shack into the ground. Typically this is not allowed, but because of this method it is allowed. In other words, what's happening is when you use the group selection, the object that you're selecting, so let's just call this concrete wall our anchor point. The anchor point is where the collision actually applies, but any item that is additionally selected as part of the group, their collision doesn't apply. However, even though the collision doesn't apply, you still have some level of restriction, and I'll show you what I mean by that. So I've used the group selection of this entire item, and now I'm going to travel to the northwestern corner of the sanctuary map. So as you can see, even though, as said, I have more freedom, I don't have total freedom, so I can't sort of place it over here. And the ghost clipping method actually gives us a little bit more freedom to now ignore some of that collision. So for example, let's just say I wanted to place the item somewhere like over here. So just for reference, if you see this sort of white pole over here, I'm going to try and place it right over here, but I can't. And the reason I can't is because some of the collision from the pillar and the small metal shack is still being applied. However, if I just go over here to activate the ghost clipping on this particular object, so that should be about now. There you go. Now the ghost clipping has been applied. Then if I now go back to that exact same spot, then I should have a little bit more freedom to actually apply this object. So here, where we were previously not able to apply this object, now if I place it, I can now apply this object as I want. So this is sort of the benefit of using ghost clipping. It allows you to have a little bit more freedom when trying to place pre-created game objects into places that you otherwise cannot. So again, let's do this one more time, and this time I'm going to try and apply a slightly larger item to this exact same spot. So this time I have a rather larger building, the warehouse to be specific. And again, I'm going to use the group selection on this. And before we actually ghost this particular object, let's see whether we can actually just apply it to that building or not. Now, while I'm doing that, if you've made it this far into the video and you found this particular glitch useful, then please do consider liking and leaving a comment, as all of that really helps to appease the algorithm gods that are in YouTube. So before we actually apply the ghosting, let's just see how much more freedom we have if we try to just apply this right over here. So as you can see, I don't seem to be able to just sort of apply this particular item right over here. So I don't know what a point of reference is. Let's just say I want to put it right over here. So you can see I cannot apply this as it currently stands. So we're just going to hit that northwest corner of the map again, just to get the ghosted effect on this. And with that, notice that this entire thing has become ghosted. And what we're going to do is, again, just apply this in the exact same spot, or more or less close enough. And this is roughly where we said we'd apply it, and just place it there. And with that, we now have this particular item over here applied. So this is sort of the benefit of the ghost clipping, which allows us a little bit more freedom in terms of being able to build more, let's just say, diverse structures that we otherwise may not be able to, not without using mods. Now, with that said, there are some downsides to this, and let's talk about that right now. The first downside to this is that when you do manage to get something ghosted, you cannot actually indefinitely place it anywhere you want. There's a particular range this applies to, and this is all related to how the loading of game objects works in the background. So as said, if you like, or rather when I explained this earlier in the video, this object happens to be right here in the southeastern corner of the map. As I walk towards the northwestern corner of the map, the object itself will just become unloaded into the game, and as a result it will become ghosted. So again, let me just travel to the northwest corner to activate the ghosting on this object, and that should be just about now. So just a little bit more and it should become ghosted about now. There you go. This ghosted object will remain in this state up to a certain range. Now, as we start to travel back towards the southeast southeastern corner of this map, the object itself will become loaded again. And that is because that was the origin of the object, or in other words, where we basically picked it up. So as we slowly start to walk towards the southeastern corner, notice that now the ghosted effect has been removed. So what this really means is once an item has become ghosted, it will remain in a ghosted state up to a certain range. After that range, i.e. when you start to walk towards the point where you picked up the object, the ghosted effect will be removed. So how do you get around this? Well, to get around this, what you could do is, let's just say I wanted to build this particular object not next to this building, but in the southeastern corner of the map instead. What I could have done is place this object here to begin with. So I could, for example, do something like this. So this object is now placed here, and then I can take this object all the way to the southeastern corner of the map, at which point it will become ghosted because this time I picked it up from the northwestern corner and placed it on the southeastern corner. So this is how you could effectively create ghosted objects in different parts of the map, as opposed to being sort of stuck in one area of the map. Now, as you may have noticed that there will be certain areas of the map that this will be, if you like, dead zone. In other words, ghosting will just not apply. So as you probably might have noticed, this central area of the map, I just am not able to get an item to be ghosted. And that is because it basically falls within the range of both the southeast spawn point as well as the northeastern spawn point of your object. So there will be parts of the map where you basically will not be able to ghost an object. Now, that said, there is another point I'd like to share as well. With this particular glitch, you will actually run the risk of crashing your game as well. Don't use this too much, in particular in really large settlements. So because I've used this in Sanctuary, this ghosting actually really works in two settlements in the base game. The first settlement being Sanctuary and the second settlement being Spectacle Island. And you probably might have guessed why. It is simply because of the size of the settlement. So if you wanted to use this in, say, something like Hangman's Alley, you won't be able to because the settlement itself isn't large enough where as you walk from one side of the settlement to the other side, objects in the game load and unload. So this particular glitch only really works in large settlements, i.e. Sanctuary and Spectacle Island. And as an extension to that, if you use this in, say, Sanctuary, and you then continue to walk away from an object's spawn point, you will actually crash your game. So once an item has been ghosted, so let's try and ghost this item one more time. Let's just pretend that the border of Sanctuary went beyond a little bit here. Let's just pretend we could take this all the way to Red Rocket in a ghosted state. Chances are the game would crash. And the reason the game would crash is because although this object is now ghosted, it appears there is some threshold where if you travel too far with a ghosted item, the game crashes. This is particularly quite painful in Spectacle Island, so do be careful when using this particular method. Now, with all of that said, one thing I cannot do is take any level of credit for this exploit. This was found by one of our fellow YouTubers called DutchSweetShid, and I really hope I've pronounced that correctly. Dutch, thank you very, very much for sharing this with us, especially from me, a personal thanks. I spent hours building settlements, and this particular exploit has effectively unlocked a whirlwind of creative ideas in my head of things I'd like to try out, and I would only assume equally the same for many more Fallout 4 players that love building stuff. So Dutch, thank you very much for sharing this with us. You are a hero. In this video, I went through the ghost clipping glitch in Fallout 4, but if you want to learn more about another additional 6 game-breaking settlement glitches, then click on the video you see on the screen right now. Click on the video you see on the screen right now and I will show you 6 additional game-breaking glitches that you can use when building settlements in Fallout 4.